that, we want to share the webinar.
Yeah, good idea, nice catch. So roadmap is an artifact. It has a representation of when I'm going to deliver value to the market. And it also brings with it this context that helps me understand why I'm doing that. There are a couple of different representations that are pretty popular. When I was coming up, almost all my roadmaps were this milestone model. So there are releases that are in the future. This is a very common kind of approach where I talk about what I'm developing now, the next thing that's going to come out, what comes after that, and then there's just this big bucket for the future. And unless you're releasing very often, that is because the future is very unpredictable. And there are some downsides to being too specific about what I'm going to deliver. What I see today in a lot of platforms built for product managers are these Gantt charts. So I think these are great for driving internal alignment. I don't think they're valuable with customers. Customers don't care how long it's going to take you to build something. They want to know when they're going to get it. And of course, the whole role of the roadmap now has changed a bit when we are delivering a lot of products as a service, SaaS as a service, and can just release things all the time. Still a valuable artifact though, but I'm going to hammer this throughout the presentation. A roadmap is more than a diagram. A diagram is just the beginning. It's our entry point into a discussion about why we're doing the things that we're doing on the roadmap. Roadmaps get misused fairly often. A roadmap is not a plan. It shows when I'm delivering the value. It doesn't address how I generated that value, how I generated those features. So you still need a plan for that. So you can think of it as this forward-looking artifact. It shows when I'm going to deliver some stuff, but it's not a detailed plan to do that. I've said this again, and I'll probably say it 5 more times today. It's not just a diagram. Roadmaps are not this ironclad commitment. They show our intent, and all stakeholders have to understand the level of confidence they should have in the roadmap. But generally, this is a statement of intent. We plan to deliver this. Things get murky, especially in the B2B world, when customers start having expectations about that roadmap, or even buy the product because of the roadmap. But product roadmaps, especially today, are not meant to be this ironclad commitment. It's not a committed plan. It's a statement of what we plan to do, what we might do in the future, the value we want to deliver. And a roadmap is not a strategy. It's really important to understand the relationship between these two. I'll talk more about strategy later, but a product roadmap is an expression of strategy. It shows how I'm going to deliver on a strategy, but it's not a strategy. For a roadmap to be meaningful, I have to have a strategy first. What are some of the parts, or how do I look at a roadmap from a structural perspective? There are a bunch of things on a roadmap, and it turns out they're rarely parallel. I can have features on there, feature areas, new technology, themes I'm thinking about. I can define a roadmap based on the outcomes I want to generate. So I just call them roadmap items. Very often they're features, sometimes they're requirements, sometimes they're just very general capabilities that might imply multiple features. Roadmaps tell a story. So we put on the roadmap what we need to tell the story at the right level of abstraction. I like themes in a roadmap. Themes are just logical ways to group the roadmap items, the investments we're making. It helps me get my head around, what we're trying to accomplish with this roadmap. How can I take all these things that are on there and somehow make sense of them? And of course, a roadmap has timing. In general, it should be, as ambiguous as possible. But you will see in this presentation, you don't really decide what your roadmap looks like. Your stakeholders do. Important stakeholders need to understand your roadmap, and they'll let you know how much detail. By the way, you will read a lot of people just trying to be, I think, outrageous, saying the roadmap is dead, don't use roadmaps, there's no need for roadmaps. I don't agree. A lot of people are saying it. I think a lot of roadmaps are misused. They're used as a plan, they're used in lieu of a strategy, but that's not a reflection on roadmaps. That's a reflection on poor understanding and poor process. And as I said, how important the roadmap is, it depends on your stakeholders. I don't know what Facebook's or LinkedIn's roadmap is. Maybe they have a public facing one, maybe they don't. That's very common for consumer products. But when I get into B2B, especially in the complex problem space, my stakeholders, my customers want to know what's coming down the pike when they have to prepare. So sometimes, as I alluded to before, customers really buy the roadmap more than the product. I worked for these huge vendors, Microsoft, IBM. The first version of our products were usually not very good at all. But people believed in us. We showed them a roadmap where we were going, and they had faith we could deliver on it. So the roadmap is far from dead. Don't believe everything you read, but there probably needs to be some recalibration about how we think about them. So now I'm going to share some secrets or some tips or whatever you want to call them. I call them secrets because I see so few people doing these things. And here they are. We've talked about a couple of them: context, strategy. I'll share a few other things that can make the roadmaps you have more effective, especially when you're presenting them. I will use a case study kind of from my past. So there's a problem in the world today with these drones. They're really inexpensive. You can get them everywhere, and they can actually do a lot of damage. A drone with just a little high explosive or some incendiary device can set things on fire, can blow people up, can do all kinds of horrible things. And these things are happening today. So we will talk today about a solution designed to protect cities from malicious drones. You don't need to know a lot of details, but there's a command and control center. There's some drones out there doing surveillance. We have radar and some other technologies. And when we determine that there's a malicious drone, the operators in the operations center can take action. They can notify a mobile jammer, for example, who can go and make the drone return to its home base. We built an app for first responders so that if damage is done, we can coordinate the response. I think that's enough to understand the examples I'll provide in the deck. So first secret is provide context. The diagram is not enough. Why are you doing things when you're doing them? What influenced the sequence that you're deciding to deliver things? Why these investments and not other? Why this cadence? Why? A million questions that you need to understand. So you need to start thinking about the roadmap as more than just this diagram, but an artifact that shows the value you plan to deliver when, and the most important elements of why that's important. So things I would talk about are like, what segments are we targeting? Do we have key dependencies with partners, with, internally? What capacity assumptions are we making? All kinds of information that somebody needs to consume your roadmap. And we're going to talk about versions later, but let's imagine that I at least have an internal and external version of my roadmap. Both audiences need to understand why those things are coming. They have different needs. That's why we'll talk about versions. But you should provide the context so that somebody doesn't just see the value you're delivering, but understands why you chose to deliver that value. So I always think of roadmaps. The roadmap artifact is multi-page, probably a presentation. You're going to end up presenting it anyway. It may be captured in a tool like AHA or product plan or whatever you use. But just the diagram isn't enough to tell the story. The second secret is linked to strategy explicitly. I said that roadmaps are an expression of strategy. So you should be able to infer the strategy looking at the roadmap. Maybe you can, maybe you can't. As a product manager, you can't take that risk. You need to make it explicit. And first, we should level set just a bit on what a strategy is. Everybody uses that term. A lot of people have different definitions. This is a simplified way, this is how I look at it. We all want to achieve success. We need to define that success. That's the first thing we do. We set goals and objectives. Goals are general, objectives are time-bound and measurable. Once I know what success looks like, I have to describe how I'm going to get there. How am I going to achieve success? It's a two-step process. And strategy is that course of action that is going to take me towards success. So I cannot have a meaningful strategy if I don't have a good definition for success. It makes no sense. Where am I going? What am I trying to achieve? So these are separate things. You can look up, by the way, the business motivation model. That's what this is based on. Great read. I've got a blog post that maybe we can link to, Burak, on defining motivation. But strategy is how I achieve success. For it to be meaningful, I have to define that success first. And here we have the roadmap for the solution I was talking about. It's called Osprey Shield. Very traditional 3-step roadmap. The first one, the theme is passive defense. So we're going to be able to sense that things are going on, and we'll use like radio or RF radio frequency interrupters to disrupt the drones, but it's passive. We're not like attacking the drone. And you can see the timing. It's Q3 of this year. The next step in the roadmap, we're going to go to a more active defense. So there's going to be fusion with radar data. We are going to, take steps so that we can actually intercept drones. And eventually, the future is, once we've laid the foundation, to be able to do the interception in air, maybe with other drones. Very traditional roadmap. But the way I should talk to this is by first talking about my strategy and goals. And this is one way to tie it to strategy, to tie it to goals. What I've done here is I've color-coded each one of these goals. And then I've color-coded the roadmap item that corresponds to it. This is just the first step. This shows you some of the ways I'm going to measure success. We're trying to lower the cost of ownership. We want to reduce our operating costs by reducing false negatives. And you can actually see the investments we're making to drive those things forward. I'm really curious how many people have seen this done. I almost never see it done. As a matter of fact, I work with a lot of product organizations. Very few of them have an explicit strategy in the first place. They don't have these goals written down the way they should. They have very general things they're trying to achieve. So this is one way I can tie the roadmap to my strategy or to my business motivation. I chose color coding because this was the easiest. There are more sophisticated ways to do it. You could categorize the items, in each milestone. But what I've done here is I've said, this is how I'm measuring success. Now you can see how my investments, by the way, not every investment you make is strictly strategic. Some things you're just catching up. You may have tech debt. It's hard to make an argument that that is like truly strategic. It's just stuff that has to be done. That's fine. But where you can, you should tie explicitly what you're investing in, what you're delivering in the roadmap to your definition of success and the strategy for achieving it. Next secret is to define buckets. This is a general prioritization approach that I see not used nearly as much as it should be. Buckets are just these logical groupings. And when we look at a roadmap, it's really an exercise in balancing things. We've got internal stakeholders like engineering who needs to do tech debt. We've got other product groups or leadership who want us to integrate. We have to balance between the customers we have and the customers we want. What do we need to deliver so that we can move beyond the customers we have and get new business? How much should we just evolve the features we have versus do something maybe disruptive or innovative? All kinds of questions. And buckets are a great way to look at this and make sure that we are balancing our investments in the roadmap. Before you prioritize anything as a product manager, you need to understand your strategy. And you should group like things. So you'll read a lot about prioritization techniques. They're useless if you're comparing something in tech debt to an innovative new feature. They don't make sense. They won't give you results. You have to group things that are alike. And when I'm doing early road mapping, this is a great practice. Create your roadmap with the milestones. Create kind of categories as rows. Think about, what am I investing in maintenance? things that don't feature, customers may not see them, but I need to do, like technical debt, performance. What investments are evolving something that I have? What is something that is new? And then what work am I doing to discover what I need to do in the future? These discovery topics may not make it into the roadmap representation. They may not be on the graph, but you as an organization should be thinking this way. We've got a tax we've got to pay just to stay in business. There are things we have to do. It usually makes sense to evolve what we have there. Most of the time, we should try to be doing something new, depending on where we are in the life cycle. But customers like new things. If we want to move beyond our customers, we may need to do new things. And we should remind ourselves in the organization that, with each turn of the crank, we can't just implement what we want to deliver soon. We have to be thinking about what we're going to deliver next. Very important that gets some cycles. So these are some generic buckets you can use, primarily planning. This is one way of looking at them and balancing them. You can then also bucket the investments in things like, hey, what are the investments we're making to help operators in the control center? What are system health investments that we're making? What about an experience, a mobile app experience? So group things together. You can do that on the roadmap. You can do that as you're building the roadmap. And again, what we want is balance. We don't want to get into a scenario where we're investing everything in UX and we don't move system health forward. We said one of our goals was lowering operating costs. So what we're looking for is balance. And the way we do that is by reducing the number of things we have to think about, putting them together as types, and then looking at the investments and thinking, wow, we have really gotten a lot of complaints about how UX is different in different parts of the product. We need to do harmonization. And I think that should be 15% of our capacity for the next 2 releases. Coming top down with these buckets helps you achieve that balance. Next secret is create versions. Your roadmap has many stakeholders: engineering, sales, marketing, leadership, customers, partners. I could go on. What are the chances that you can meet all their needs with one artifact or one roadmap? Very unlikely. Leaders want to see something different than engineering wants to see. Customers want to see something different. So that is something that I look for in a mature product organization, is product managers should talk about the different versions of the roadmap they have. And the way that usually works is there's a master version that has everything in it, maybe in a fair amount of detail. There might be a roadmap that we show leadership. There we abstract some things. I don't need to see all the detail. We may hide some things. I've done that. I don't want to show them that I'm losing 20% of my capacity fixing something that I messed up last time. I may de-emphasize that. I may have a version for key customers, for all customers. I may have a public version. I may have one for the ecosystem. I've been in a situation where we built special roadmaps for market analysts. When we were meeting with Gartner, we showed them something different because we really wanted to highlight what we were doing that was differentiating. That's the message we wanted to get across. So roadmaps tell a story. You've got a bunch of different types of people to tell a story to. So if you don't have versions of your roadmap, I would be questioning that. Why not? Are you not sharing it with all these different stakeholders? Because when you try, you will realize that you need different versions. And here's a perfect example. I told you all these tools that I see today create this Gantt style chart. That is inward facing. That helps teams align. I would never show that personally to a customer. Why do they care? Why do they care that this took a lot of effort and this didn't? They want to know, when do I get it? Right? So just an example of, you could have the same items, same investments, but different roadmaps. This next one isn't obvious. This is a trick that I learned. I did a lot of new product development. I worked at this big companies, and it's tempting to think, wow, IBM has a lot of money for development. Money is not an issue. That's the opposite of the case. In a big, mature organization, there's a lot of money, theoretically, but there are a lot of people trying to get that money. So I think it's actually harder to get additional budget in a big company than in a startup or a scale-up or something. There are big processes in place that govern that. It's really difficult. So what I learned to do is anytime I presented my roadmap to decision makers, I would ask for increased investment. Actually, anytime I got in front of a decision maker, I would pitch them. I believed in what I was doing. I knew if I had more resources, I could do more. And one of the most powerful tools I found was actually showing them via the roadmap what an additional investment could do. So here's our roadmap, very kind of boring. Back in the day, we didn't have this. Now PowerPoint has this morph transition. And what I can say is, hey, leadership, if you guys give me a couple of front-end engineers, a back-end engineer, and a UX designer, this is what I can do. I can move things up in the roadmap. I can change the timing. I can get more to market faster. This is just part of the argument. You also have to show the economic impact. You should say, look, network optimization is one of our biggest sales blockers. If we can get that out a half a year earlier, I talked to sales and that could unblock €500,000 in revenue. And I only need 100,000 euros to do it or whatever. I hope you get the picture. Here's the roadmap plan of record. Here's what I can do if you give me more money. Really powerful. Just part of the argument, as I said, but a really powerful way to use the roadmap to show what increased investment does. Or let's say that your resources are cut. That happened to me a lot. Leadership goes through the organization and says, every team is giving up 10% of their capacity for this new thing we're doing. It's a great way to show, okay, this is the impact. Nothing is for free. Let me show you what that's going to do to the roadmap. You could do that if sales or leadership is asking for a bunch of new stuff. You can describe that to them verbally, but I can tell you from experience, when they see the impact on the roadmap, they understand that, you know, everything has a cost. So those are the secrets. Quick rewind. A roadmap shows delivery to the market, ideally based on a strategy. It has two parts. You represent it somewhere. You show what you're delivering when. And then you need business context so that people understand why the roadmap is the way it is. Roadmaps are an expression of strategy. You need a strategy before you build the roadmap. And then you should explicitly link them so that it's very clear to everybody. Don't leave it to their imagination. This is our strategy, and this is how I'm executing on my strategy via the roadmap. Super powerful, super important. I would say the most important thing you do as a PM is building a roadmap. If you can only do one thing, let's say you don't have time to build a strategy or you don't know how to do it, build the roadmap because it at least implies a strategy. If you can't do a release plan, if you can't build a backlog, at least build a roadmap. That gets alignment started. It shows your intent. It's powerful. By the way, don't do just one thing as a PM. This is kind of a rhetorical statement, but that is how important roadmaps are. So quick review, always provide context, explicitly link your roadmap to strategy. Consider putting the investments in buckets, the roadmap items in buckets so that people can understand them, see some progression for a topic through releases. You have a bunch of stakeholders who should see your roadmap. Make sure you create a version, and that's a version of the representation and a version of the context that they need. And then use a roadmap in a creative way to show leadership what you could do with greater investment or decision makers. There are some other secrets. Think about using tooling to do this. A lot of the tools like AHA are really getting mature. Make sure you validate roadmaps. That's a whole nother webinar. I see people building roadmaps and like kind of broadcasting it, saying, okay, guys, this is what we're doing, instead of, hey, sales and marketing, this is what I was thinking. What do you think? When I was at Microsoft, your most important asset as a PM was your roadmap. That's how alignment was done between organizations. That's how commitments were made. I knew that a product group was going to deliver to me when I saw that integration on their roadmap. And then you can also do quick narrations of the roadmap so that people can view those unattended. Not everybody can make it to your meeting, but do a 5-minute recording on the roadmap, provide the context, can be super powerful. So what is my call to action? What do I want you to do? Go to your roadmap today, look at these secrets and revisit it and improve it. If you want, we do road mapping workshops. We can help your product team in just a couple of days define a strategy, or at least an initial strategy, and very quickly build a roadmap that then can evolve and grow. I do a lot of coaching with people, product leaders, product managers, one-on-one. I can help you build your strategy and roadmap. And then stay tuned. There's a lot of stuff to cover. We talked about a bunch of big topics on road mapping. So we plan to do more of those, and we would love to see you there. Feel free to send questions in chat. I will get all of them. That's the way this is set up. Burak, I think we will make the slides available in a follow-up.
Yes, sure, why not?
And any questions, would love to connect with you on LinkedIn. I'm easy to find. There aren't a whole lot of prickles in the world. So find Burak and me. Would love to connect there. If you have questions, feel free to send them. If there's anything we can help your organization with in terms of strategy or road mapping, just holler.